What is up, YouTube? It's your boy Mills, back with Hometown Commander, and we are back for another episode of Personal Brews, the show where I talk about decks that I'm brewing for myself in hopes that, one, you might enjoy them as well, but two, I want to be the channel that brews more decks than your favorite Magic channel, and to do that, it isn't just about Millsy Brews. It isn't just about brewing around the new commanders that come out. It's also about brewing around old commanders. It's also about brewing around the commanders we love. And I've gone through a little bit of renaissance lately. You know, we've done a lot of these Millsy Revisits episodes. You can go and watch those. I was able to go back through a lot of the decks that I was really testing and that I really cared about. And as I looked through the test box, I realized it was probably time to start rethinking what I was testing, to go back to my roots, to try new things, and really just redetermine what I actually wanted to play. Yesterday's episode or the other day's episode was Kaikar Wind's Fury, and that's a deck that I'm very excited to bring to the table. I've got to play it a couple times, but today we're talking about the first commander that I've ever built. First commander I ever built when I started Magic the Gathering, and it's crazy to think about the fact that this deck is gone back that long. There's been a couple times in Magic's history since I took this deck apart, which was a few years ago, that I kind of wanted to come back to Dinosaurs. We saw Zalortha in Ikoria, and that was a dinosaur that to me looked pretty cool, and I was like, man, could this be the dinosaur that gets me back into it? Like, Zalortha looks pretty cool. It's a pretty good, card in slot. And then in AFR, we got the Trask, and the Trask looked really cool. I was like, man, this is the kind of dinosaur that seems perfect for Gishath. It's something that when you rip it off the top, it's just going to hurt. It's a great dino, and it seemed pretty good. And then we got Throsta and MH2, and I was like, man, this is a pretty cool dinosaur. It does almost everything that we want. A dino to do. It has trample over planeswalkers for the first time ever, haste, and it's a good body. And I already had the idea, if I ever go back to the dinosaurs, to try to play around with having at least one way to get extra combats to try to end the game if we can get a big attack off. But I honestly have to say the dinosaur that brought me back to Gishath was Tyrannix Rex. I know a lot of people are going to look at this and go, it's a 7-mana 8/8 dino that has trample, tax 4, ward 4, and haste. It's not that good. You're still going to have to hit your opponents more than twice with Tyrannix Rex to toxic them out. But I think the thing that makes me like Tyrannix Rex for this deck is these last 4 dinos that we just talked about, Throsta, Tyrannix Rex, the Trask, and Zalortha, literally are all better than dinosaurs we were playing previously. Like, there's a lot of really great dinosaurs in this tribe, and there's also really just some mediocre dinosaurs in this tribe. And I think the more new dinosaurs we get, like, the better the tribe actually gets for it. And so, to me, that was the important part of coming back to this deck, was leaving it, not just leaving the deck the way that it was, but seeing a card like Carnage Tyrant, which was like a slam dunk at the time this deck came out. This and Galto were like the dinosaurs when this deck came out. It was like they were like the corner pieces of this deck. And now, we have things like Tope Stomper, which isn't very high up on the dinosaur list, but it's still really good. And these new dinos slot right next into Zakama, and these are the dinos that do really good. So I thought, let's come back to dinos. Let's do it. Let's make it again. Let's run it a test, because in a little under a year, we are going to be going back to Ixalan. Lost Caverns of Ixalan is going to be coming out, I believe, next January, or next February. In that early winter slot, of 2024. So like, I feel like this deck is going to get pieces, and it may get a new commander. I mean, I don't know for sure. I'd love to find a list that I enjoy playing, pick up some of the dinos that I don't have anymore, and just get a potential dinosaur core ready for if a new commander does come. And if a new commander doesn't come, well, then hopefully Gishath gets some new cards over the year. It gets some new dinosaurs from that set, and we can kind of bolster up the deck that we already have. But let's talk about Gishath for anyone who's never played Gishath. Gishath is 5 red and green and white for a 7/6 dinosaur avatar, vigilance, trample, haste. So it can attack the first turn it comes down, and we want it to, because its ability says whenever it deals combat damage to a player, reveal that many cards from the top of our library, put any number of dinos from among them onto the battlefield, and the rest to the bottom of your library. in a random order. So we're trying to get dinos off the top. And in my current list, I have 32 dinos, meaning hopefully at the worst, 1 of every 3 cards should be dinos. Now, there's plenty of ways we can play with this. I'm not playing the spine, the rack Sensei's Divining Top stuff yet. I think that is a eventuality for this deck if I really want to do that. But I'd like to test without it, try to get myself sighted back into what the dinos are trying to do, and then maybe down the line we can play around with that. So let's talk about here's the land base if you guys want to take a look at it. See, and look, this is what I think I'm going to try to run. Let's get into the enchantments, because I think these support cards become the single most important part of this deck. I think one of the biggest pieces this deck got was Shadow in the Warp. Shadow in the Warp came out in the 40k decks. The first creature spell you cast each turn costs 2 less to cast. There is a possibility that we could get Gishath out 2 turns earlier than we could before if we see Shadow in the Warp. Now, we've tried to build the deck to ramp so that even if we don't see Shadow in the Warp, we're still trying to get Gishath out as soon as possible. My hope is that with Shadow in the Warp, we actually see Gishath sooner, and therefore we would actually be able to get ahead on our strategy against other players. Where we see the Tithe, which can help us on a ramp. We're playing things like Sylvan Library because I own a Sylvan Library, and I think it's one of those cards that's going to be a win more card for us, push us forward. Unnatural Growth is going to double Gishath's power when it's out, which means we get to see more cards from the top of our deck. Rhythm of the Wild, a pretty classic card in the deck already, can give Gishath a +1/+1 counter when it comes in, or all of our other dinos haste when they come in, which is pretty great. Reconnaissance can give all the rest of our dinos vigilance, which means we can attack freely. Garrick's Uprising to draw us cards and give us trample for the rest of our cards. Mirari's Wake can double all of our mana, and I think this is one of those cards that could very quickly get us Gishath the next turn. If we see Mirari's Wake really early and we lay this down on turn 5, turn 6, we could cast Gishath. So this is another one of those cards that, like, if we see it really high up, if we see it in our opening hand or our first couple draws, Mirari's Wake could be the thing to get Gishath down even sooner. Duelist Heritage can give Gishath double strike, and that becomes really important because remember, Gishath lets us look off the top for how many points of damage we deal. So with double strike, we actually get 2 different looks off the top. And then we're running the Bear Umbra Ag Assault combo to try to get into some infinite combats if possible. We don't have a ton of ways to search out these 2. My hope is with some of this added draw and an e-tutor and some different things like that, that hopefully we can get ourselves into this combo and end a game that way. That'd be one of the ways we can end the game. We're also playing the sort of Feast and Famine, which can pair with Ag Assault, because it's going to be very, very hard for Gishath not to deal damage to a player just due to how big it is, and it has trample, and it's just going to be generally hard to block anyway. And if we pick the right player, we could get in for some damage. So Sword of Feast and Famine also pairs with Ag Assault. So these 3 cards kind of help us with that game plan. Arcane Signet, Crypt, Soul Ring, and then we're playing Urza's Incubator over the Herald's Horn because, again, I think the goal is to get Gishath down sooner rather than later and take advantage of hopefully getting kind of above some of those decks before they can get set up. I mean, there are going to be a lot of other decks that have a chance to outspeed us, but my hope is if we can get Gishath down as soon as possible, we can outboard support a lot of decks. Now, I think the biggest problem, and we'll get into this in a second, and we're also playing Great Henge there, Green Classic and Commander, and it gets even better in this deck because Gishath is 8 mana, so with Gishath down, we can get Great Henge down for 2 mana. I think the biggest problem our deck is going to face is protection. At the end of the day, when we dump a bunch of dinos down onto the battlefield, the one single problem we're going to have is someone looking at our board and going, I want to wipe that. If your opponent proceeds to lay 6 or 7 dinos down on the battlefield and then says go, your goal is now going to be to get rid of that board, right? And so I have tried to get as many protection spells in the deck as I can. The answer to this is now 5, and that doesn't seem like a lot when you think about it, but my hope is if we can be drawing extra cards with Sylvan Library, we have 2 that we want to see more often than not, Flawless Maneuver and Clever Concealment, because both of them have a chance to being played for free. Flawless Maneuver can get played for free as long as Gishath is out. Now, the problem is it only gives them indestructible. If someone farewells us, well, then Farewell ruins most boards. There's nothing we can do against a Farewell. But Clever Concealment has a chance of potentially saving our board for free as long as we have enough creatures to untap or tap. And my hope is if we're hitting creatures off the top with Gishath and we're putting enough dinos on the battlefield, because Gishath has vigilance, he can count for 1 of the 2 white for clever concealment. So hopefully we can set up our board in a way that we can convoke for free. But we're also playing in They Shall Know No Fear, which allows you to choose a creature type, and creatures that type get indestructible. And then Boros Charm, which can also give Gishath the double strike, but it can also give all of our creatures indestructible. So we're trying, and same thing with Heroic Intervention, giving all of our permanents hexproof and indestructible. So we have these 5 cards, and we're going to try to protect our board that way. Playing the Enlightened Tutor, this can be used for a lot of different things. This can be used for Shadow and Warp. This could be used for Rhythm of the Wild. This could be used for the Agasol or the Bear Umbra if we see either of them. This can be used for a lot of things, and also can get any artifact. So this is pretty great because it kind of is the best tutor in our deck because it gets all of the pieces we want. I think you could probably also argue maybe we bring in and open the Armory because that would get us into that combo as well, being able to get an aura, which would be a Bear Umbra, or I believe Open the Armor, you can get equipment, which would be sort of Feast and Famine. But though that would be relying on us seeing the Agassault and not the Bear Umbra. The thing I like about Enlightened Tutor is it gets all 3 of them depending on whichever one we see. So I think that's a great option. I think the other option is just going to be trying to draw into them. As far as sorcerers go, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 ramp spells here. I'm heavily considering bringing back in Utopia Sprawl and Wild Growth like I had before. I'm just not sure yet. I think the problem is we still want to run a ton of dinos, and I'm just not sure where to lose the slots. Finale, Devastation, and Triumph are 2 of our game enders. If we can get to Gishath, it's not going to be very hard to get to Finale, Devastation as far as mana goes. So my hope is it can be our game ender, can go get anything we want, pump all our creatures up and get moving. And then Triumph for the Hordes, of course, classic green finisher that can push through and end the game. And getting up into the dinos, I think we have a pretty classic set of characters as far as dinos go. I think there aren't a ton of dinos to choose from to begin with. So really we're trying to choose all the dinos that give us the best litany of value. We are playing 1 non-dino creature in Xenagos. The reason Xenagos is here is because it can give creatures haste, and it's also just going to generally help. The cool part about this is if we have Xenagos out before Gishath, we can definitely pump up Gishath and kind of double its power with Xenagos. The other non-dino creature I'd consider bringing in here would be Aroas, just because I think Aroas would do exactly the same thing we need by giving all of our creatures menace, which could potentially help us end the game by making all of our dinos bare and harder to block. We're trying to pick dinos that each have individual abilities, but at the end of the day, all of the dinos are kind of the same in that we just want to be able to use them to the effect to help us push forward and win the game. Some of them have cast abilities that, to be honest, I don't ever plan on actually casting them. I just want to get them off the top. But the really important ones for us, as far as the ones that we want to see more often, Apex Altasaur can fight something when it comes down. That helps because it can help get things out of the way. Carney T, of course, hexproof and can't be countered. That's great if we have to hard cast it, but it also helps once it hits the battlefield because it's going to be tough to remove. Atali, of course, is a commander favorite in that every time it attacks, we get to exile the top card of everybody's library and play them. That's an effect that can be really good and very helpful as far as getting some things out of the way. Galta, of course, one of our biggest creatures in the deck, our 12/12. A big old boy with trample and can cost us a lot less to cast when it comes down. Goring Ceratop, when it attacks their creatures we control, gain double strike. So although it's kind of unassuming by itself, it can turn a whole board of dinosaurs into a lot better. Kanjali Sunwing has all our opponent's creatures come in tap. So this is one of the ones we want to, if there's any dinosaurs we see in our opening hand, this is one of the ones we want to see early. Marauding Raptor can make our creatures cost a little bit less. The only warning with Marauding Raptor is we really don't want to see it with Polyraptor because this will create an infinite loop we can't stop. So we have to be a little bit careful with this. Now, the cool part about Gishath is it says you can put any number of them, so we don't have to put Polyraptor down. Like if we had a Marauding Raptor, we wouldn't have to do it, which would help us, of course, stop from making that infinite loop from happening and forcing us to concede the game or automatically lose the game by creating that infinite loop we can't stop. Quartzwood Crasher, whenever it attacks and deals damage, or or whatever, any of our creatures with trample deal damage, we get some tokens for it, and that's pretty great. Rampaging Brachinon gets a lot bigger depending on how many lands we get. Frostnon will stop people from gaining life, and whenever a creature enters the battlefield, it deals 1 damage to that creature's controller, which can help kind of ping our opponents down a little bit. Regal Behemoth doubles our mana. Now, the card here shows Lizard is the creature type, but this has been eroded to be a dinosaur. So Regal Behemoth is a dinosaur, and it works perfectly well in our deck. Registrar Alpha is one of the better ones, giving all of our dinos haste, and that's pretty great because it's going to help us on most turns. Ripjaw Raptor draws this card when it gets dealt damage. Shifting Ceratops is kind of shifty. It has a great ability to give it reach, trample, or haste, so it can kind of hop out and live into different scenarios. Silverclad Frostnon is one of our favorites. Whenever it's dealt damage, each opponent sacrifices a permanent. This is great when we attack with it, because then if our opponent blocks, it just gets worse for everybody. Temple Allosaur first would deal damage to any other dinosaur you control, prevent all but one of that damage. This is going to help with blocking and Blasphemous Axe and things like that that would normally destroy our creatures by damage. It's going to help prevent that. The Trask, of course, just a big boy. Same thing with Throsters, just big boys that we want to see. Titanoth Rex, 11/11 with trample. Or we can cycle it to put trample on a creature. Taupe Stomper comes in and gets us that land. Trapjaw Chiron exiles a creature our opponent's control until it comes in whenever it's dealt damage. So the more it's dealt damage, the more we get to just remove our opponent's creatures. Verdant Avatar is one of my favorites. Whenever it or another dinosaur or another creature enters the battlefield, you gain life equal to that creature's toughness. This is great because it could just end up keeping us up, giving us enough of life to keep us alive in those grindy games. Awakening Sun's Avatar, if we cast it from our hand, destroys all non-dino creatures. But more often than not, Waking Sun's Avatar is probably something we're going to see off the top. Wayward Swordtooth can give us a couple extra land plays, which is great. Zakama is probably the one dinosaur we don't want off the top. We really want to play it from our hand, because if we play it from our hand, we get to untap all of our lands, but it has a couple really great abilities in dealing damage, destroying artifacts or enchantments, or gaining life. And then Zatalpa, the memeiest dinosaur, the one that's been printed the most, it has a litany of keywords, and that's pretty great when you have to spend 8 mana for a 4/8. Zatalpa is pretty great because its vigilance and flying allow it to block pretty well, and it can help protect us. But at the end of the day, Gishath is a very straightforward mid-range attacking deck. We're trying to get Gishath down. We're trying to attack and deal damage, get dinos on our board, protect them, and swing out to end the game. Yes, there's a glaring weakness in this deck, and that is one board wipe can set us pretty far back. But I think at the end of the day, not every deck can be ironclad. Not every deck can have can have preventions against every issue that you could find at a table. Nor do I think we want Commander to be that way. We want every deck to have fun, and I think this deck is the deck that shows the most big creature turn them sideways fun, or in Gishath's case, not turn it sideways fun, that you can have in these 3 colors. There's lots of Naya commanders that produce big creatures in attack, and I think that's a playstyle that we should encourage more in Commander. So many Commander decks just end up being about combos and cards and infinite turns or infinite damage, or all of these things, or your classic Commander combos that we all know and love. But I think sometimes we should celebrate just good old turn it sideways magic, and I think this is one of those decks that I've always appreciated for that. A lot of the love I have for my Goreclaw mono green deck has come from this deck, that turn it sideways magic, where you just put down big creatures and you turn them sideways and you watch your opponent score with the blocks they have to make. And so my hope is, as I bring this deck back into the test box, as I play it, my hope is I can make it feel the way it used to, that just turn it sideways magic that's fun to play. And no, I don't expect this to be the most powerful deck in my deck box. I don't expect this to be an 8 or a 9 or whatever meme we want to make about power level. My hope is that this deck feels fun to play, and I would love to hear from anyone who plays Dino decks. What do you think? Down in the description, what cards, or down in the comments, what cards am I missing? What cards would you recommend for Dinos? And I would love to have some discussion about my card choices. I love it when you guys comment and tell me what you think of the deck, what you think of the card choices. That's what makes brewing fun, is talking about strategy and card choices and things like that. And so I will never turn down responding to a comment down in the comments about what you guys think of this deck. Drop me a like if you like dinos, or if you like brewing content. Subscribe if you want to follow me on my journey to outbrew your favorite Magic channel and to just be cranking out decks, because that's my goal over the next few months, is just crank out decks, blow up your feed with with brew content, and make myself not only a better brewer but a better player along the process. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will catch you next time.